Howdy students, this is Mrs. Amiette, and today we are looking at this worksheet called How to Solve a Monohybrid Punnett Square. So the first thing that you want to do with this worksheet is put your name up at the top here. Okay, so here's our problem. A plant with red flowers, and then we're given the genotype, that's heterozygous because we have a dominant and a recessive allele together, is crossed with another heterozygous plant. In this type of plant, red is dominant to white, so that tells us that the capital R stands for red and the lowercase r stands for white. So the first thing we want to do is determine the genotype or the letters of the parents. Well, that's real easy because it's given to us. The parents are both heterozygous. So we have a capital R and a lowercase r and another capital R and lowercase r. So both the mother and the father are heterozygous. Okay, the second thing we need to do is set up the Punnett square with one parent's genotype on each side. So we're going to put mom at the top because mom always goes on the top. So we have a dominant allele from mom and a recessive allele from mom. Dad always goes on the side. So we have a dominant allele from dad and a recessive allele from dad. So we completed number 2. Number 3 asks us to fill out the Punnett square middle by matching the letters. Okay, so we match up the alleles from mom and dad. So in this first square, we're going to get capital R and capital R. Over here, we're given from dad a dominant and from mom a recessive. So this is heterozygous. Down here, same thing, except dominant is from mom this time, recessive from dad. And in this box, both parents are giving us a recessive allele. The next thing we want to do is analyze the number of offspring or children of each type. Okay, and what this Punnett square really represents is the chances of getting each type of child from one cross. So this represents one mating, and with that mating, what's the chance of getting a homozygous dominant, a homozygous recessive, or a heterozygous? So the total genotypes that we get are homozygous dominant, we also have a chance of getting heterozygous, and we have a chance of getting homozygous recessive. That's a Z and that's a G. What are the phenotypes of the offspring? So again, what this Punnett square represents is with each mating, what are the chances of getting these phenotypes? Now, genotypes means the letters. Phenotypes, that means the physical expression of the gene. So let's write that here. Physical expression. how does that gene express itself? And in this case, it expresses itself in color. The dominant is the red color and the recessive is the white color. So what are the phenotypes of these offsprings? Well, we get both phenotypes. We will get both red and white. Okay, now we have to break it down into percentages. So what percent of the offspring are homozygous dominant? So if we look at the square up here, we have one box out of the 4 total are going to be homozygous dominant. So that's 1 out of 4, which is 25%. What percent are heterozygous? Okay, if we look at the box again, we have 2 out of 4 are heterozygous. So 2 out of 4 we can reduce to 1/2, which is equal to 50%. So we have 50% that are heterozygous. And then we want to know what percent of the offspring will be red. So we look back up at the box. Anything that has the dominant trait is going to be red. So we have dominant here, we have a dominant here, and we have a dominant here. That's what dominant means. If the dominant is there, then it's going to overshadow the recessive. The recessive will not be expressed. So 1, 2, 3 out of the 4 total are going to be red. So that's 75%. What percent of the offspring will be white? Well, white will only be expressed if dominant is not there. So here we have 1 out of the 4 with no dominant, so 1/4 or 25% will be white. Something this paper didn't ask us about, which I think is important, is what percent are homozygous recessive? So I'm going to give you a minute to look at the chart there and figure that out. What do you think? You're right. 1 out of 4, or 25%, are homozygous recessive. Okay, make sure your name is on this paper. You're going to turn this in to me for a grade.